speaking in
Canberra.
Very significant risk to the economy. It veers very much towards the upper end of the range of possible outcomes that we could have expected to have seen today. In particular, this adds very significant costs to the Australian economy and to business. By our calculations, this will add $7.9 billion in costs to the affected businesses over the year ahead. So that will be a very considerable burden that those businesses will either have to take to the bottom line or pass on to their customers. It comes at a time when inflation is emerging as one of the most urgent challenges facing the Australian economy. And if we are to address that, if we are to remain competitive, then clearly this is not a decision that will help in those circumstances. So happy to take some questions.
The Commission said that the rate will put inflationary pressures on due to the strong market and projections for the market. What evidence do you have to the contrary that says that this minimum wage won't put inflationary pressures on?
Well, we disagree. We would say at the moment businesses are facing three key challenges. They're facing great difficulty accessing the labour that they need. There's intense disruption in the supply chain, and we're seeing a very significant spike in energy prices at the moment. All of these things are adding to pressures on the supply side. They are pushing up input costs, and that is feeding through into inflation. Any decision that comes at this point in time at the upper end of the range of possible outcomes will add to costs to business. As we've said, that cost will be an extra $7.9 billion hitting the bottom line of affected businesses as a result of this decision. That will add to inflationary pressures.
The Commission said that this was below inflation, but there was an opportunity to catch up those real pay cuts in following years. Are you concerned that this means that we're going to see outsized pay rises being ordered for years to come?
Well, look, it certainly adds to that pressure at a time when labour is intensely difficult to access. We're seeing record levels of vacancies out there in the workplace at the moment. I think one of the things that this decision highlights, and the Commission has tried to really nuance, it's a very complicated decision. There's a number of different elements to it. I think what this highlights is that, frankly, this national wage case process, the way it feeds into the modern awards, it's an antiquated process. It's a process that's had its day. It's not compatible with the needs of a modern, internationally competitive economy that needs to be operating in a flexible way and responding to the circumstances, the competitive challenges and the need to drive productivity if we're going to have higher living standards in the future.
What's the alternative? What's the alternative?
Sorry.
What's the alternative to a national minimum wage case?
You must have, for minimum wages, fine. That's the 180,000 people on the lowest wages, the wage safety net. But when it flows through into the modern award system, this really needs to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. We need to get back to much more effective enterprise bargaining, flexible wage setting, driven by the market.
Can you be more specific on what you think the consequences of this decision will be for businesses? Given they're already having trouble finding staff, they can't sit and laying off staff. How are they going to respond?
Well, I think that's a challenge, and I think there are sectors of the economy which are still struggling to come out of the pandemic. So in that context, I think anything that adds into the cost burden that those businesses are facing at this point in time will impose difficulties. So for small businesses, if they're facing costs going up at this time, then that is certainly going to add to pressure that they're already facing.
Business closures, for example, or what are your suggestions?
Well, I think this can impact in several ways. It will make it less profitable in some businesses. It will make it more difficult for them to invest and to expand their capacity. In some cases, they are going to have to look at passing on those costs to consumers. That adds into inflationary pressures. In the worst cases, of course, it could mean that some businesses will have to face the difficult decision to close their doors.
How contributory do you think the government's decision was to this outcome? Obviously, it was a fairly high
number that they put forward. Do you think that weighed in heavily to the Commission's decision today?
Oh, look, it is one of the submissions that the Commission has obviously taken into account. I think there have been different views from across the economy, from business groups, from unions and from the government. At the end of that process, where the Commission has landed is much towards the upper end of the range of those submissions. That will place significant costs on the economy and it will heighten the risks that we face going forward in the year ahead.